When you've got arguably the best budget IEM of all time, making any changes to that formula is kind of inherently risky. But this, I feel like it's a little bit riskier than it had to be. Hey folks, I'm Mark Ryan. This is Super Review. And today we're taking a look at this, the Truthear Pure, which is the follow-up to the Truthear Hexa, which is the aforementioned, in my opinion, best budget IEM of all time. It came out about 3 years ago, and it is just a fantastic rec the whole time. Now they've decided to change it. Did they make it better? Well, as you can see, visually it looks pretty similar. In fact, there's a lot in common with the Hexa here. It's still a hybrid set, still got 3 balanced armatures, 1 dynamic driver, and the price is also the same at $90 US. The differences are all really in the tuning, which are still kind of in the range of neutral. Like, I actually had this realization before I was recording this video that the Truthear Hexa might be the most neutral IEM on the market. Not just the most neutral IEM in the budget range. Like, I can't think of a more neutral IEM at any price, which is interesting. But here we've got a slightly different flavor of neutral, but it's different in a way that, again, I think is kind of risky. So the truth is, I actually heard this IEM almost a year ago in Shenzhen last September. There's a pre-production version of the Pure there. I listened to it, and I could tell that it was warmer, it was a little thicker, and I kind of had the impression that it sounded a little congested, like maybe they went a little bit too far. Did they fix it, or did my listening impressions change? Well, I've had this IEM now for 10 days. I've been living with it, listening to it for 10 days straight, comparing it to a bunch of other IEMs, including the Hexa, and I'm ready to let you know what I think. Before we get into that, I guess a quick shout out to Shenzhen Audio for sending in the Pure for review. If you want to check it out, I will have them linked in the description down below. But with that said, let's go to the table. We're going to talk about the packaging, what you get inside the box, physical form factor, build quality, fit and comfort, and then we're going to talk about the sound. And I want to really focus these sounds, the sound evaluation on comparison versus the Hexa, but also versus a couple of other IEMs at around $100, so you have a good sense of whether or not this IEM makes sense for you. Okay, here's the packaging. It has a cartoon person dressed up as a bunny, which is a choice, and if you like that choice, they also include it as a postcard that you could send to a friend who may also appreciate that choice. Apart from that, this is what you get inside the box. I'm gonna put the IEM to the side for a bit. We'll talk about the accessories. This is a little carry pouch that Truthear has included with pretty much all of their IEMs. It's not the most protective because it is very soft and floppy, but what I like about it is it's actually pocketable. Most of these cases are just not pocketable. It's not something I really want to use for carrying around. So bonus points for being pocketable, but it is also a little bit on the weird side. So I don't know, I think I like it. Apart from that, you do get, of course, a card with a bunch of ear tips on it. And I like to see 3 different styles of ear tips included with an IEM. Because like I've been saying, I think when you get a new IEM, I would spend at least 30 minutes trying out different ear tips. Even if you only get one style of ear tip, try all of the sizes. Even if like you think you're a medium person, you might find with some IEMs that small actually works better, and with other IEMs, large actually works better, even though your ears are the same. But here we do actually have 3 different styles. One of them is a standard foam ear tip, just one size of that, and then over here we've got 2 different styles of silicone ear tip. They're slightly different in shape and height, as you can kind of see from this angle, although I think the biggest differences are going to be just that this one over here, the lighter gray, has a slightly wider nozzle or a wider bore, and then if you flip them around, you might also see that the nozzle is quite a bit thicker here on the lighter gray one, which could actually have some impacts in terms of fit. Some people had issues with the nozzle on the Hexa being a little bit too large. We'll talk about this in a little bit. This nozzle is a little bit smaller, but using that thicker walled ear tip might kind of undo that extra smallness. So just something in consideration or to consider. And again, try different ear tips to find out what fits you best. You might notice I'm not using the stock ear tips. I'm using Dunu Candy ear tips, which is just because I've had the Hexa for 3 years. I know which ear tip works best for me on it, and it's this one. It just works the best. But that is neither here nor there. We're going to talk about the build quality on the IEM, starting with this cable. And it is generally a cable I quite like. If you've been following my channel, you probably know I'm a big fan of the cable that comes with the Truthear Gate, or originally it was the Truthear Ola. This is basically the same as far as I can tell, but it is like a silvery color. And the silvery colorness is actually done quite well. Behavior on it is very similar. like thickness and weight wise, it seems to be exactly the same as far as I can tell. It's just silvery white, which I don't mind, apart from the fact that I don't know that it's the best match for this IEM. I feel like we got black shells. It would look a little bit better if it was all blacked out. That's just my opinion. In fact, again, a bit of background lore. When I heard this IEM in Shenzhen, the pre-production version they had was actually an all white shell, which looked kind of cool. I think they chickened out though, and they just went with the black, which it looks fine. But sorry, that is neither here nor there. Let's continue with the cable. It's got a nice small Y-split. It's got a functional chin slider. Actually stays in place for the most part. I dig that. And of course, you've got preformed ear hooks up top that terminate into a standard 2-pin connector with these little plastic 2-pin connectors, which are my favorite personally. Now the 2-pin connector on the IEM itself is slightly recessed. You can see there's a slight recess there. So I don't know, it should still work with pretty much any 2-pin connector out there, apart from like the QDC style knuckles. So generally nice and compatible. And yeah, I dig what they did with the cable. Okay, you might have noticed I've made a slight modification. This red O-ring is not on here by default. Basically, it's really hard to tell which channel or which side is left and right. You can see there, it says R, but you can see that because it's under magnification and I got lights on it. Normally you can't see that. I can't see that. So once I figured it out, I put on the red ring so I would never forget. Hashtag never forget. Anyway, okay, that'll bring us to talking about the earpieces, which you might have also noticed I've modified. But before we get to that, I guess just to highlight, they are an all black design. They're basically the same as the Hexa. In fact, I will pull in the Hexa here for a side-by-side comparison. Very similar. They just added a little bit more of a design flourish here with these little slits. To be honest, I kind of like the more simple, clean look of the Hexa personally. But your mileage may vary. You might have some disagreement. Where there wasn't really any disagreement. So I posted a picture of the Pure when I got it on my YouTube community page. Pretty universally, the feedback on it was nobody liked the way that the Truthear font is on this earphone, which is why I have it kind of blacked out. You might notice that it's actually kind of hard to see. It's because I colored over it with one of these, just a black grease pencil. It's something I do with a lot of my cameras. So that I have a black camera, I'll black them out. I just colored out the logo because I don't want to see it. This one doesn't look that great. I don't normally deface my IEMs before I review them, but look, this is what it looked like before. And you can see it's quite bold, quite big. And everyone kind of said the same thing. And so I just kind of wanted to show you that, well, if you got a grease pencil, you can make it better, at least in my opinion. I think it looks better more blacked out, although you'll see it's not entirely blacked out. Anyway, so I think that's probably, okay, no, there's actually some more I can talk about the shells before I put it in my ear. So it is basically the same shell design as the Hexa in terms of being like a semi-translucent 3D print. I've got the Hexa over here on the right. What you might notice is that the Pure is a little bit extra thick. And that will play a part in terms of the fit, which I'll show you in a little bit. But the other thing that is actually a little bit thinner, I've kind of already talked about this, is the nozzle. I'm gonna take off the earphone or the ear tip real quick, just to show you that on the Hexa, the whitest part of the nozzle was the far tip of it. And because of that, it caused some issues for some people with fit and comfort. Here with the Pure, we are down to about 5.5 millimeters on the diameter of the tip. Now, if you want to count this part where it's got the little lip that holds on the ear tip, well, it's still a little, 6.1? Yeah, 6.1, that's what I usually get. It's still about the same width as the tip on the Hexa, but because it is down 1.5 millimeters or so, it should actually have some notable relief to people who had issues with the fit of the Hexa. I personally didn't have issues with it, but I understand why that people would, and so it's nice to see that they've made a slight adjustment there. Okay, we've got the ear tip on it. Let's throw this thing in my ear and talk about fit and comfort. A lot like the Hexa. It is slightly different, but mostly the same. In terms of size, I would say this is like a medium small. It's actually a pretty compact little earphone. I dig it. So in terms of comfort, like it doesn't take up a lot of room in my ear. I generally find it comfortable. It does have like a slightly angled design, but it doesn't result in any like sharp edges or anything like that on the ear. Generally quite a comfortable IEM. My biggest issue in terms of the fit, it's kind of the same thing as I had with the Hexa, is because it's not really like molded to fit into the ear, all of the fit stability of this earphone is going to come down to how well your ear canal can grip onto the ear tip, which is why for me, again, I know that these Do New Candy ear tips work out really well on this earphone for me. Yeah, I don't know, generally a nice fitting IEM. I had no issues with it because I went straight to an ear tip. I already knew it would work well. Now, I did mention that this is a little bit extra thick versus the Hexa. And how this plays out in terms of fit, just notice kind of the relation of the body of this earphone to this little nubbin, which we call the antitragus. My antitragus is basically underneath the earphone itself. Now, if I pull in the Hexa, drop this into my ear, you'll notice that the Hexa will actually fit behind the antitragus. So the antitragus adds a little bit of extra stability in holding it in place, which could be a bit of a downside for me on the Pure, but in practice, again, I think because I already knew the ear tip to go to, I had no issues with the fit stability. I slept with this thing, woke up with it, still in my ears, which is kind of my main test of fit stability and comfort. If it survives a night in my ears, and it survived multiple nights in my ears, again, I've had this for 10 days and I've slept with it pretty much most of them, that's a good fitting IEM, and I really have no complaints about that. So that's probably as much as I should talk about the physical form factor on this earphone. So we can talk about the sound here on the Truthear Pure. And to do that, we're going to start with the frequency response graph, which I've got linked on Squiggly. If you want to check it out for yourself, it's linked in the description. You can go to Squiggly and compare this with literally hundreds of other IEMs that I've measured on my same rig with the same methodology. It's a nice way to predict if what things are going to sound like in relation to other IEMs. But let's talk about it together. So this darker dotted gray line back here, this is my version of a neutral sound signature, right? So you can kind of see where the Pure deviates from it. But notably, the Hexa didn't really deviate very much from my sound signature. I promise it was not a tuning collab or anything like that. It did not work with Truthear on it, but it nonetheless aligned very well with what sounds like neutral to me, which is why I say the Truthear Hexa is arguably the most neutral IEM that you can buy. Here with the Pure, what they've done with it is, again, I think a little bit risky. What they did, okay, let's just start from, let's say 1 kilohertz down. This is like the lower mid-range in the bass area. Versus my dotted line, you can see that this line is a little bit north of that. So they basically added like 1.5 decibels, maybe 2 decibels from 1 kilohertz down, which adds a little bit of thickness, a little bit of density to the sound. It sounds warmer versus the Hexa, which could sound pretty neutral again to my ear. The Hexa did have a little bit of a sub-bass boost to it, maybe imparts a little bit of warmth to the sound signature, but overall I would just say the Hexa was mostly a neutral sound. Here with the Pure, it's definitely warmer, it's definitely denser. But it wasn't just this thing that they changed. This change alone, I would have been like, okay, that seems like the change I would expect. The fact that they combined this with also changes up top, which also contribute to warmth. So they've kind of reduced the upper mid-range a little bit. They've pulled back some of that vocal content, as well as slightly attenuated the treble. Those two things in combination are very risky. In fact, when I heard this thing in Shenzhen, I heard it as, I think I already talked about it, a little bit congested, a little bit too warm, and a little bit kind of two-dimensional. This frequency response kind of explains probably why I heard it that way. So upon longer listening session at home, but also I don't know what changes they've made to this thing since I heard it in Shenzhen. I asked if they changed it. They said that they did change it. They wouldn't tell me what they changed. Did those changes change my impressions? Well, here's what I'm going to say up front. I don't think it's too congested. I did have that impression when I heard it in Shenzhen. This version of the Pure, I think it walks the line, but I like it. All right. Again, versus the Hexa, this is definitely a warmer, denser version of a neutral sound signature, but still very much squarely in the realm of neutral. If you're looking for a deep, exciting bass boost with a lot of exciting upper treble, that is not why you would get an IEM like the Pure. It's very much, and I'll get into this more when I pull in the Hexa for direct comparison. But think of this as like kind of like an HD 650 type neutral sound signature, maybe even a little bit warmer than that. So it has like this denseness. It is not an especially stagey sounding IEM. If you're looking for a strong sense of separation between instruments and having all the spaciousness between, you know, in a mix being really blown out, like The Pure doesn't really do that. It does an okay job of it. It just doesn't really lean into that because it's instead trading off that more down-tilted, warmer, relaxed sound signature. Now, what saves it for me is that the treble execution is actually really, really good here on the Pure. In fact, some of the best treble that I can think of in this price range. So a track that comes to mind, or maybe even an entire album, and I talk about this often, is The Cure's Disintegration album. It is a very densely recorded album that it can be very congested on the wrong set. And I was concerned that it would sound congested on this set, but I feel like the treble execution is just enough that you still get a nice sense of spaciousness. There's a good sense of definition between things. It's just not exaggerated and not especially sparkly or exciting. But it is nonetheless, I think, very satisfying because the tonality here is frankly fantastic. The body, the warmth, the vocal reproduction, even does a pretty good job of texturing. In fact, it might even be a little bit better textured than the Hexa, which is interesting because the Hexa is the more brighter, kind of lively tune, which is normally what I would associate with vocal texturing. But this does a fantastic job. Where I will say that I think that this is just kind of like squarely better than the Hexa is in its bass presentation. I think the bass was probably the weakest part of the Hexa sound signature. I don't think it was bad, but I think it was probably the weakest part. Here, it might still be the weakest part. It's not the best part, I'll say that, but it does have a stronger sense of incisiveness on its initial attack. So things like kick drums, they've got more definition behind them, and they're a little bit more satisfying, frankly. And yeah, I guess if you're looking for the Hexa plus bass boost, to some degree, that is what the Pure is, but it's not in the way that maybe you're traditionally used to having a bass boost on an IEM, because they didn't abandon the fact that this is and maybe should be a neutral set. This is still very much a warm neutral set. It's just more of a dense, warm neutral set. Let me pull up my notes real quick to make sure, see if I'm anything else I wanted to talk about. Yeah, it just kind of sounds right. It's got a nice, easy treble with enough precision that it has a good sense of definition, but this is definitely not going to be a technical monster. Let me pull the Hexa in again, just to kind of reiterate and maybe put a finer point on some of these comparisons. Again, the Hexa, this is the brighter, kind of livelier sound. It's not, I don't hear the Hexa as particularly bright IEM. I really do just hear it as kind of neutral. But versus the Pure, which is more of a warmer, denser sound, this one sounds more bright. I think a good analogy, if you've heard them both, would be like the Sennheiser HD600 versus the HD650. And I'm not trying to say that these sound exactly like those, but if you're familiar with them, they both are very much neutral sounding sets, but the HD600 sounds a little bit brighter, a little bit more open and kind of lively, and I think also more technical. And that would be, in this analogy, the Hexa. Whereas the HD650 is a little more relaxed, a little bit warmer, a little bit fuller, a little bit bassier, but maybe a little bit less technical. And in this analogy, I think that applies really, really well to the Truthear Pure. When it comes to those two headphones, personally, I'm like kind of squarely in the camp of I prefer the HD600. When it comes to these IEMs, I actually find this a harder decision to make. I think generally the direction of the Hexa is more to my liking. Like I generally like more of a lively sound, a little bit more openness and a little bit more separation. But I feel like the treble presentation on the Pure kind of brings it another step ahead in terms of the matureness and the quality of the execution, to the point that, again, I think that they're kind of equally good. I enjoy both of these IEMs kind of in equal parts for different reasons. If I had to pick one, if I had to only own one, it would really depend on what am I buying it for? Is it my only IEM? In which case I'll probably go with the Hexa, because I would really miss out that separation. But as like an additional IEM, where I've already got some other IEMs that maybe give me that sense of separation, there's where it becomes more difficult and where I might actually lean more toward the Pure. It just is, I think, a more mature, better execution overall, even if the tonal balance is a little bit too far in the warmth direction versus my absolute ideal sound signature. So hopefully that gives you a good sense of how to make sense between these two different IEMs. But those aren't the only ones I wanted to compare, because I did also want to bring in this guy, which is the new Jazeer Defiant, Jazeer Cross Z Reviews Defiant. Yeah, this is actually a collab IEM. surprisingly damn good. And also very, very different from what we just talked about, where I talked about this being squarely neutral, kind of warm and relaxed. This is an exciting, kind of in-your-face sound signature, but it's done really, really well. It is both bright, but also not aggressive in its treble presentation. I think the treble is generally actually quite smooth, but it does have a forward character to the vocals. It's got a nice sense of clarity, and it also has a pretty big bass boost on it, which gives it this sense of contrast that is very fun and exciting, really strong sense of definition. And I think if you're looking for that spaciousness in your sound and you want that definition and separation between instruments, while I think the Pure does a fine job of that, I think the Defiant is really kind of next level on that. And then the bass is actually pretty well done. It is the bassiest of the IEMs I'm going to show you today. And I think it's also like nice, tight, and punchy bass. It is not bleedy, it is not soft, it is not mushy. This is just generally pretty well done bass. I would say the only real downside of the Jazeer is that because it is kind of an aggressive V-shaped sound signature, it can sound a little bit artificial at times, depending on what you're listening to. If you're listening to a lot of organic music, it might sound a little bit too digital in a sense, not because it's like low res and like crunchy or anything like that. It really is surprisingly smooth. It just has, an artificialness to the sound signature. That's just kind of a trade-off for having this level of contrast and engagement. But that is one IEM. The other one, if you're looking for maybe kind of a balance, maybe an in-between, would be this, the AFU Explorer. Price on this one is, I believe, 120 bucks. Price, it's on sale a lot, so it might be cheaper. But also a hybrid set, 2 balanced armatures, 1 dynamic driver. I forget what the config is on this. It's also a hybrid. I forget how many drivers, but here with the Explorer, this might be an option if you're looking to split the difference, right? Because this does have more of a distinct bass boost versus what you'll get on the Hexa and the Pure. This is not what I would call a neutral sound signature. This is more in the direction of being kind of like a fun, bassy sound signature, but it is also a lot warmer versus the Defiant, right? It's more of a relaxed, more mid-range focused sound, less on the treble and less on that sense of contrast. It does a really good job of texturing and like micro contrast, at least as good as the Pure, maybe even a little bit better than Pure. So that's actually pretty impressive. And it just has like a nice meaty bass behind it. I don't think it's quite as incisive as the bass on the Defiant, but it is more incisive and tighter than the bass you'll get on either the Hexa or the Pure. That's for sure. And yeah, I just think it also overall has kind of a relaxed sound signature. So if you're looking for, you know, neutral, pure neutral, I feel like the Hexa is probably still the closest. If you're looking for neutral plus just a little bit extra body and warmth on it, that would be the Pure. If you're looking for the absolute most fun and engaging set, I think that is the Jazeer Defiant. And if you're looking for something that maybe splits the difference, that would be the AFU Explorer. All of these, honestly, are pretty stinking good IEMs, but that will lead me into my conclusion here on the Truthear Pure. This has been a tough one. Again, a risky change. Did it pay off? I think overall it did. Is this better than the Hexa? I don't know that it's better than the Hexa. In some ways, I think it's better. In some ways, I think it's worse. I don't think overall it's worse. I think this is still one of the best IEMs you can buy at under $100. So for that, this is still a 5-star IEM for me. If you want to check it out, I will have it linked in the description down below. And while you're down there, if you haven't yet, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, ding the YouTube bell, join me on Discord, also linked in the description, and I'll catch you on the next super review. Cheers.
Joined with the force of reviews, we now have the tools to brave the misleading world of audio fools. Hey, this review is super, and so are you. Grab your headphones, sniff a graph, and share your thoughts in this pursuit.